Friends, I am Deepak Kannal, conducting the program for the PG course in Visual Arts, and today in the subject Philosophy and Aesthetics we are discussing the theory of Riti. In the last few sessions we have been discussing about Rasa theory, and along with Bharata's Rasa Sutra we discussed the various opinions and interpretations of Rasa Sutra by the important scholars in the Indian aesthetic tradition. Riti is altogether a different theory. Unlike Rasa, it mainly speaks about the formal aspects of art. Rasa inquired into the emotions, Rasa inquired into the contents, Rasa inquired into the expression. But Riti is mainly concerned about how of art rather than what of art. Riti literally means the manner, it means the way, but sometimes it is also interpreted as style. I personally have a little reservation for that, and we will discuss that particular issue at a later juncture. But the notion of Riti can be traced back to Bharata's Natya Shastra again. As we discussed earlier, most of the ideas which come into most of the theories which are discussed in Indian aesthetics, the roots of those theories can be traced in Rasa Sutra, in Bharata's Natya Shastra. Most of the theories which are discussed in the medieval period, the roots of those theories can be traced in Bharata's Natya Shastra, and the roots of Riti too can be traced in the same text. Of course, the term Riti is introduced later by a scholar called Vamana in 8th century. Bharata uses a different term for a notion which is very similar to this, though not exactly the same. He calls it Vritti. Vritti means tendency. While talking about the different types of dramas, which Bharata calls Dasharupaka, in Dasharupakas, he speaks about the different possibilities and different tendencies of artists, and he talks about 4 different vrittis. Those vrittis are Bharati, Kaishiki, Arabhati and Satvati. Now these vrittis, he thinks, are Bharati vritti is Vakya Pradhan. It's almost a classical tendency which is very composed and mainly literary in nature. Kaishiki is Nritya Geeta Pradhan. It is slightly decorative. In that kind of drama there is a lot of music, lot of dance. It doesn't like the Bharati vritti, which is mainly based on literature. These plays are based on music and dance. Satvati is full of shaurya and tyag, velour. So Satvati is full of velour, and Aravati has krodha and audhatya. It is very flamboyant, it is very aggressive, it is very violent. So there are plays which can be categorized, which can be classified under these 4 vrittis according to Bharata. All the plays can be categorized under these 4 categories. He also speaks about the pravrittis. These are the vrittis, and the combination of these vrittis result into different pravrittis. When he talks about the pravrittis, he believes that if Satvati and Kaishaki come together, it results into Avanti, and Dakshinatya is a product of Kaishiki. Satvati and Aravati, if they combine together, they result into Panchali, and Bharatiya and Aravati together, they result into Odramagati. So there are 4 vrittis and there are 4 pravrittis which are responsible for the different types of plays according to Bharata. This is not a theory, this is an observation, and this is a classification which Bharata proposes, and that is why that cannot be considered as an aesthetic theory. This material later on has been converted into a theory by 2 scholars, mainly Dandi and Bhamaha. As said earlier in the first module, Dandi and Bhamaha seem to have undergone some formal training in visual arts. They have studied visual arts to some extent, and we find some evidence for it. I personally think that their training in visual arts must have inspired them to propose this theory of Riti, because the kind of classification which they propose can be seen in visual arts of that particular time. We also talked about the period of Bhamaha and Dandi. If you remember, we came to a conclusion that they can be safely placed in 7th century. I told you that Dandi's grandfather was working in the Satavahana court, and we calculated that considering that the Satavahana kingdom came to a downfall early 6th century, Dandi can be placed in 7th century very comfortably, and Bhamaha is his contemporary. Both of them have contributed immensely to the theory of Riti, but of course on many issues they contradict with each other, they criticize each other. Now this particular theory is based on the notion of guna and dosha. Because a particular riti, a particular style must have a particular property or a particular quality. These properties are called gunas and doshas, and a guna is considered to be a sthira dharma of literature or any art. It is a permanent quality of art, unlike the alankaras. Alankaras are considered as asthira dharmas. Here the riti is, the guna is considered to be a sthira dharma. Now which are these gunas? There are several different types of gunas. There are shabda gunas, there are artha gunas, and there are rachana gunas. Similarly, there are doshas, the demerits. Guna is a merit and dosha is a demerit. These demerits are also shabda dosha, rachana dosha and artha dosha. There are some doshas which are also known as rasa dosha in the later period. Now these gunas and doshas decide the different ritis. A certain quality can be observed in a certain riti or a certain style. So let's try to understand the notion of guna and dosha first and then switch over to riti. If you see the definition of guna or dosha that has been offered by these scholars, it is a little curious that while talking about guna, dosha viparyaha guna. The absence of dosha, the absence of demerit is guna, merit. And what is dosha? Guna viparyaha dosha. So the absence of guna is dosha and the absence of dosha is guna. Now this is not a definition at all. We cannot say that this is a definition. I always jocularly say that if you ask my address, I'll tell somebody that I stayed next to his house. And what is his address? He stays next to my house. The definition is something like that. But probably they are trying to avoid making a definition because it is very difficult to define the guna and dosha. There are so many factors which play a very crucial role in, because there are many good making qualities and many bad making qualities, and a particular good making qualities may not remain a good making quality all the time. However, they consider the guna as a sthira dharma. So there are some pitfalls in the definition of these notions, guna and doshas, but let's try to understand what they say further. Now, while talking about the gunas, there is a controversy. There is a school which believes that there are 10 gunas, and there is a school which believes that there are only 3 gunas. When we are talking about the shabda guna, gunas which have been described as, there are 10 gunas: shlishtata, prasad, samata, samadhi, madhurya, oj, sukumarata, arthavyakti, udarata and kanti. Shlishtata means appropriate use of words. Where the words are properly used, shlishta is well constructed. So sushlishta is well structured. So where there is an appropriate use of words, where the words are properly constructed, that is considered to be the guna shlishta. Prasada is parity between word and the meaning, that is lucidity. Prasadika is the text which is considered to be a lucid text, where it is very easy to understand the meaning of it. So prasada is also a very important guna. Samata, agreeability. And here in samata, they had considered that using the smaller samasas. Samasa is a very curious device used in Sanskrit language, where several words are joined together with different meanings. I'm sure the people who have studied Sanskrit in their childhood know what samasa is. There are two ways of combining the words in Sanskrit. One is sandhi, where the word is only mechanically connected, and in samas there are various possibilities of deriving the meaning. So sometimes the samasa can make the expression extremely cryptic. If you have very long samasas, the expression can get more and more cryptic. So they say, according to Samata, they propose that the samasas should not be too long so that the reader can understand the text easily. The fourth guna is samadhi, which means multivalence, having more than one meanings. Actually, this is always considered to be a very important guna of literature, where the literature can issue more than one meanings, multivalent. Quality that can be enjoyed again and again. Sweetness is the simplest translation of madhurya. So it is pleasant. Oja is vigor, gusto. Sukumarata is tenderness, which is very close to, which is very similar to Shlishtata. Arthavyakti is naturalism. I don't know why Arthavyakti has been translated as naturalism by most of the scholars, because Arthavyakti is meaningfulness. If you translate this word literally, it means meaningfulness, but most of the scholars translate Arthavyakti as naturalism. Udarata is sublimity, and Kanti is luster. So the words should have these qualities. But there is another school which believes that there are only 3 gunas, not 10, and rest of the gunas come under those 3 gunas, and they consider only Oja, Prasada and Madhurya as 3 gunas. Oja is vigor, Prasada is lucidity, and Madhurya is lyricism or sweetness. They say that these 3 gunas are the main gunas, the rest of the gunas can be categorized under these 3 gunas. These are the Shabda gunas, but there are Artha gunas which are more important. So along with these gunas, Ritikaras have also discussed the doshas in details, and mainly the Artha doshas. The Shabda doshas are very simple, like having wrong words at wrong places, or not having proper yamakas, not having proper usage of words, or when they talk about the Rachana dosha, the structural demerits, when there is a mistake in the Vrutta, there are meters. If the meters are not properly constructed, if the yamakas are not properly constructed, all those demerits are considered to be Rachana doshas. But the Artha doshas are more important, where Apratitatva, Sandigdhata, Gudata and Ashlilata are considered to be very important Artha doshas. Apratitatva is pratita, is to communicate. Apratitatva is failure of communication. If the piece of art fails to communicate what it intends to, then obviously it is a faulty piece of art. Sandigdhata is ambiguity. As I said earlier, that in traditional art, ambiguity was always considered to be a demerit, but in modern art, we have accepted ambiguity as a merit of art. Rather, ambiguity, even Dhvani theory, which is an Indian theory, a slightly later theory, considers ambiguity as a merit of poetry, not a demerit. But the Ritikaras consider ambiguity as a dosha. Gudhata, again, Gudhata and ambiguity, there is not much of a difference between Gudhata and ambiguity. Gudhata is mystery, that is also considered to be a dosha. And Ashlilata. Ashlilata is vulgarity. Now, Ashlilata can be defined in various ways. What is Ashlila in USA may not be Ashlila in India. What we consider Ashlil, what we consider vulgar, may not be considered vulgar in Africa. Every society has different norms, and finally the vulgarity is always defined by the social norms, and since the norms keep changing from place to place, even the definition of Ashlilata becomes very, very ambiguous. We cannot be very sure about the exact definition of Ashlilata. But Rasadosha, Anandavardhana says that Nirasata is the only Rasadosha. If you are talking about the demerit of poetry, the Nirasata, if it doesn't have rasa, if it doesn't have interest, then obviously it is a bad work of art. Rest of the things are fine. If it is Ashlila, if it is not properly constructed, it happens so many times that a painting may have many flaws, but still it can be a beautiful painting. If we see early works of Van Gogh, they are not technically perfect, but they are extremely charming. Now the same is true about every art, that even a work of art with many flaws can be a very pleasant work of art, very stimulating work of art, and a work which doesn't have any mistakes, a work of art which doesn't have any specific demerit can be extremely boring and monotonous. So because it is not a work of mathematics, the rights and wrongs are not at all important in the realm of art, and that is why Anandavardhana says that the only demerit of literature is nirasata. No other dosha is important. Paraspar Virodhi Rasayojana is considered to be another dosha by some of the scholars. In a single work of art, if you try to collide two different rasas which are temperamentally different from each other, like Karuna Rasa collapsing with Hasya Rasa could be a major mistake in literature. But today we know that there are several works of art where we call it black humor, where Karuna Rasa mixed with Hasya Rasa. There is a beautiful play in Marathi which has been translated in so many other languages also by a playwright called Satish Arekar. The name of the play is Mahanirvan, and it is based on the death of a middle class person, and whatever happens after that death is so hilarious, but along with that humor you can also experience the pathos which underlies. So here these two rasas, which are obviously contrary to each other, have been very successfully blended together, and a great work of art of black humor has been created out of it. So it is possible to do that. Now, because these definitions have been given to us in 6th, 7th century, we will have to give a rethought to them. We will try to understand what they talk about it, and then perhaps formulate our own opinion on it. So, Paraspar Virodhi Rasayojana, like Shrungara against Bhivatsa, Shanta against Raudra, or Karuna against Bhivatsa, are considered to be Virodhi Rasayojanas, and they should not be done according to some of these scholars. Kshemendra is of the opinion that the only, like Anandavardhana says that Nirasata is the only dosha. Kshemendra is of the opinion that Anauchitya is the only dosha. Propriety, if it is improper, then it is not acceptable. Auchityasya rasa jivita bhutasya anauchityadrute nanyad rasa bhangasya karana. In Auchitya Vichar Charcha, Kshemendra says that Auchitya is the only life of all the rasa, and there is no other reason than Anauchitya which can destroy the creation of rasa, the beauty of a work of art. So gives all the credit to Auchitya only. There is one more dosha which has been mentioned by the scholars, that is Adhika Padatva and Nyuna Padatva. I think this calls for a more serious attention. Adhika Padatva is overstatement and Nyuna Padatva is understatement. Sometimes a work of art speaks more than necessary. Along with these demerits, a very important demerit has been discussed by the Indian scholars, and that is Adhika Padatva and Nyuna Padatva. These two terms can be literally translated as overstatement and understatement. Adhika Padatva is overstatement, Nyuna Padatva is understatement. A work of art, if it states more than necessary, more than adequate, then obviously it becomes very loud. It becomes an overstatement. Such a work of art can spoil the rasa. And if it is Nyuna Padatva, if it doesn't express enough, then it fails to communicate what it intends to. So naturally, it has to be a statement which is apt, which is optimum. It should not speak too much and it should not speak too less. That is Adhika Padatva and Nyuna Padatva. Understatement and overstatement that should be avoided from a work of art according to the Ritikaras. Now, keeping these things in mind, we will try to take into consideration the opinions of different scholars who have commented on the notion of Riti and Vritti. Mammata, we are still grappling with the notion of Vritti because we have yet to reach Dandi and Vamana. Mammata, while talking about Vrittis, he talks about three vrittis. One is Upanagarika, the other is Parusha, and the third is Komala. Upanagarika is a Madhurya Vyanjak vritti. It generates lyricism, it generates sweetness, and if the best example would be the poetry of Jayadeva, or if you listen to Jayadeva's Ashtapadi, Pralaya Payodhi Jale Balimadbhuta Vamana Padanakha Neera Janita Jana Pavana Keshava Dhrutam Vamana Shariram Jai Jagadisha Hare. Or the other beautiful example is Chandana Charchita Neela Kalevara Pita Vasana Vanamali. Now this can be considered as an ideal example of Upanagarika. Parosha is Ojo Vyanjak, which is very vigorous. And the best examples of Parosha would be the Ravana Stuti or the poetry of Bhushan. We know about Bhushan's poetry, where there is a lot of gusto, lot of vigor in it. Komala, again tender in nature, like to Sharadhara Garadhara Sa, Pavisa Ravisa Smaradi Sayakasa. So this kind of construction, which gives you a feeling of tenderness, feeling of delicacy, that is called Komala. The term itself is telling enough. It explains what kind of riti, what kind of vritti it must have been. So these three, Upanagarika, Parusha and Komala, are the three vrittis which have been discussed by Mammata. Anandavardhana has also commented on different vrittis, but now we will switch over to the notion of riti. If we are talking about Dandi and Bhamaha, they have used a different term for this particular concept. They use Marga or Vartma for Riti. Marga is the way, Vartma the manner. The Vamana is the first person to use the term Riti. Though the discussion of Riti is initiated by Bhamaha and Dandi, the actual nomenclature is introduced by Vamana in 8th century. Now, there are various shlokas which explain what exactly Riti is. We will try to take them into consideration. Bhoja in Saraswati Kanthabharanam says, Ringata Vidhi Dhato Sa Vyutpatya Riti Ruchyate. He believes that ring is the dhatu from which the word Riti emerges. But this doesn't say anything significant about the notion of Riti or the concept of Riti. The other statement which has been given by Dandi is more telling. He says, Astyanneko Giram Margaha Sukshma Bheda Parasparam Tad Bhedastu Nashakyante Vaktum Pratik Kavistitaha. There are various ways of expression. The same thing, now here I think the notion of Riti is very well explained. He says that there are various ways of expression. The same thing can be expressed in many ways. So, Astyanneko Giram Margaha. Gira is the language. There are various ways of expression. Sukshma Bheda Parasparam. And there are very subtle differences between those expressions. Tad Bhedastu na Shakyante Vaktum. It is difficult to define what exactly is the difference, because Vaktum Pratik Kavistitaha. Every artist has his own style. Now here this definition goes very close to the notion of style, because he is talking about personal style. But later on this particular notion has slightly changed in Vamana's definition. Vamana in Kavyalankara Sutra says Riti Atma Kavyasya Vishishta Padarachana Riti. Riti Atma Kavyasya. Riti is the soul of poetry, because it is the way you express that is more important than the content of it. In support of this, we can say that there are so many Western artists who have painted mother and child, but Raphael's Mother and Child is considered to be a masterpiece. There are so many people who have made the portraits, but we consider Mona Lisa as one of the great works. So the same subject has been painted by hundreds of painters, but there are a few painters whom we consider as great painters. The subject matter has not defined the quality, it is the way that has played a major role in evaluation of that particular painting. If we talk of literature, if we go back to the classical Sanskrit literature, we consider Kalidasa as one of the great poets. If you read Kalidasa's poetry, most of his poems are not different. The subject, if you see the subject matter, the one of the greatest works of Kalidasa, Abhigyana Shakuntala. If you read the story or the content of Abhigyana Shakuntala, it is not different than a Hindi film. Now you can see that right in the beginning, when Dushyanta comes to the ashram, now this lady Shakuntala is being troubled by a black bee. Dushyanta comes, chases away the black bee, and immediately Shakuntala falls in love with him, and then she keeps staring at him. While Dushyanta also, he also has the love at first sight, and then they come together, get engaged in Gandharva Vivaha, and then Dushyanta leaves the ashram and promises that he will take her after a few days. He goes back, forgets her, and then you know all the story. After all those dramatic events, finally his memory comes back and he accepts Shakuntala. Now, if you see a Hindi film, here Shakuntala is being troubled by the black bee, and in a Hindi film, the heroine is walking on the street and being troubled by the local hoodlums, and the hero comes and chases away the hoodlums, and then she falls in love. There is hardly any difference. The story is not different, but the way it has been told, the difference lies there. Because the manner is more important, the style is more important, it is not the content, it is the way. Because if you see the ancient Indian literature, most of the plays, like Bhasa's plays are not independent plays. Most of those plays have been borrowed from Mahabharata, or they have been Urubhangam is a play which is straight away borrowed from Mahabharata. But if you read Mahabharata and if you read Urubhangam, you will get a different experience. If you see Pratima Nataka and the original story from Ramayana, you will realize that Pratima Nataka is far more dramatic than the original story. So it is Bhasa's pratibha, it is Bhasa's genius that makes the same story more palatable and more dramatic. So because of the Riti, that work of art has become a greater work of art. That is what Vamana is trying to tell us, that it is Vishishta Padarachana Riti and Riti Ratma Kavyasya. Riti is the soul of poetry. Vishwanath in a later period says Padasangatana Riti Anga Samstha Visheshavat. Padasangatana Riti, the way you compose the padas, that makes the Riti. Now he is talking about the construction. Perhaps that is not the real soul of the theory which Vamana has proposed. Vamana is talking about the manner. Here he is only talking about the construction. So probably Vishwanatha in Sahitya Darpana is misinterpreting the notion of Riti. What Vamana intended to say, or what Dandi and Bhamaha intended to say, is perhaps not the same thing which Vishwanatha is trying to tell us in Sahitya Darpana. These people are trying to tell us that it is the style that makes a work of art more palatable. Whether it is Bhama, Dandi or Vamana, they are trying to plead that it is the manner that matters more than the content. The way it is expressed is more important than what is being said. And that is why I was tempted to compare it with formalism. The formalist theories also give more importance to the manner, to the form than the content. And naturally, if we are comparing it with formalism, it is quite likely that some people might be tempted to compare it with the European notion of style. Riti and style are very similar to each other apparently, because it is the manner. Even the style is very close to a manner. But there is a slight difference between the Indian understanding of Riti and the Western understanding of style. Style in the West is considered to be involuntary manner. The word style comes from stylus. Stylus is that reed pen. And when you use the stylus, you do not have to control the thickness or the thinness of the letter. It comes automatically. It is an involuntary process. Style is as involuntary as your signature. Style is as involuntary as the writing with stylus. You do not decide your style. It comes out automatically. And that is why there is your personal style, which Bhama is talking about. Bhama Bhama and Dandi are recognizing that personal style. So there is a personal style, there is a period style, there is a regional style, and all these styles come out of the zeitgeist of that particular period. It is an automatic product of the zeitgeist of that particular period, and that is why it is very, very natural. It is not controlled by the artist. The artist doesn't decide his style. It comes out naturally. On the other hand, what Vamana has in mind about style is slightly different. He believes that the artist should be in a position to choose a style to suit his expression. If I am trying to express something really vigorous, then I should choose a different style for it. So for Vamana, style is a matter of selection. For the Western notion of style, it is an involuntary expression. So this is a basic difference. So sometimes when we get tempted to compare because they are very close to each other, the line in between is so thin, so unnoticeable, that it's very natural for anybody to take it for style. But here there is a slight difference between the two, and that is why Vamana and the other scholars also, they propose different styles for different expressions. If we are talking about Western art, the styles which we are talking about, like if we say Venetian style or North Italian style or Renaissance style or Roman style, there are various criteria to define a style. It could be a religion, it could be the period. So there are various criteria, but ultimately we are trying to evaluate the result of a particular art activity. And then we categorize those activities under different styles. Here it is a predetermined decision. The artist, before starting his work, is deciding in which style he is going to express. Whether he is choosing Bharati for his expression, if we are going back to Bharata's nomenclature, or Kaishiki for his expression, or Arabhati for his expression. If we try to use the terminology which was proposed by the later scholars after Vamana, they mainly talk about the Vaidarbhi and the Gaudi. So the artist chooses whether to express in Gaudi or whether to express in Vaidarbhi. This is very interesting. Now here they have tried to identify a few styles, all of them. And most of these styles have been named after the different regions of this country. The most important of them are Vaidarbhi and Gaudi. Vaidarbhi comes from Vidarbha, which is central India. Gaudi comes from Gauda, which is Bengal and the surrounding part. Then the other styles which have been discussed by the later scholars like Vamana, he talks about Panchali. Now Panchali comes from Panchala. Rajashekhara talks about Magadhi, which is obviously from Magadha, that is Bihar. Vishwanatha talks about Lati, that is Western India, the coastal region of Gujarat. And Bhoja talks about Avanti, that is central India, the area around Ujjain and Indore. Now, if you see the artist of that particular period, a person from Madhya Pradesh does not necessarily express in Avanti, or a person from Lata Pradesh does not necessarily use Lati for his expression. A person from Magadha is not confined to Magadhi, he may express in Vaidarbhi, or a person from Vidarbha may choose to express in Gaudi, which means that these styles do not have anything to do with the regions. Probably these styles emerged in different regions, but later on they were exploited by the different artists of different regions, and that is why that regional reference was forgotten. Now they do not have any specific regional reference. That particular style cannot be associated with a particular region. We must recognize this. So there is a slight difference between the notion of style and the notion of Riti, and the Riti, though appears to be a regional variation, in fact it is not so. So let's try to understand what exactly, in the previous session we talked about the gunas and doshas. So the classifications of these styles is based on the different merits and demerits, or different properties and qualities of expression. Now the two most important styles, it may not be possible for us to discuss each of the style because there are so many of them, but we will discuss the two most important styles because finally it boils down, all these styles boil down to these two major variations. Vaidarbhi is considered to be, it has Sugamata. Sugamata is lucidity. Vaidarbhi has Sugamata. It has Swabhavikata, that is naturalness. It is natural. It is Sugama, it is Swabhavika. Sanyam, restrain. There is a composure, there is a restraint, Vaidarbhi style. And there is Sukshma Madhurya. There is very subtle lyricism. Now, I personally feel that here these people are almost talking about classicism. If you discuss the qualities of classical expression, this is almost classicism. On the other hand, if you read Gaudi, Gaudi has praudhata, that is maturity, krutrimata, articulation, atishayokti, that is exaggeration, and adambara, that is flamboyance. Isn't it amazing that when a scholar like Wolflin tries to trace the evolution of art history in the West, he is talking about the similar qualities. Now, the qualities which we discussed, maturity, articulation, exaggeration, flamboyance, are the qualities which you see in the post-classical phase, whether it is Roman sculpture, Roman art, whether it is Baroque art, or in India also, if you see the post-classical developments, you will see the same flamboyance in that particular period. There is grandeur, there is flamboyance, there is a lot of show-off in that expression. Now, here it is almost talking about these two important phases which have governed the development of art history in the West as well as in our own country. It is classical and Baroque, or classical and post-classical, which is very interesting. And that is why sometimes I feel, if you see the development of art in India, we do not see these developments in theatre. It's very interesting that if you really want to use the actual art practice as illustration, in literature you will not find this kind of development, this kind of evolution. But if you try to trace the evolution of visual arts, the same evolution can be observed in visual arts, which keeps shuttling between two polarities. This idea of polarity was proposed by Wolflin, a very important art historian of the West. So he believes that the art keeps shuttling between these poles and goes further. You can trace the evolution of art using these polarities, and Dandi, Bhama and Vamana are almost trying to say the same thing. It's very interesting. But at the same time, here, as I told you, that it is not necessarily a chronological development. It is not necessarily an evolutionary development. It is a matter of choice. So it is quite possible that here in the Indian context, Vaidarbhi may not follow Gaudi or Gaudi may not follow Vaidarbhi. They may coexist. You will find artists working in these two styles simultaneously. So the two artists staying next to each other, one of them might be using Vaidarbhi for his expression and the other might be using Gaudi for his expression, because it is a matter of personal choice. So it is not the inevitable pattern of evolution as it has been seen in the West. Instead, it has been only considered to be a matter of personal choice to suit the personal expression. If you are trying to portray a scene from Mahabharata war, how can you choose Vaidarbhi for it? Because Vaidarbhi is very composed. Vaidarbhi has Sanyam, Vaidarbhi has subtlety, Vaidarbhi has Sugamata, Vaidarbhi has Svabhavikata. Now, the whole trauma and turmoil of Mahabharata war it is impossible to express all those things in Vaidarbhi style. On the other hand, if you are trying to portray the interaction between Dushyanta and Shakuntala, how can you choose Gaudi for it? Because Gaudi has adambara, Gaudi has flamboyance, Gaudi has exaggeration, Gaudi has articulation. It's very, very turbulent. Now, when two lovers are talking to each other and interacting with each other with the innermost feelings, at that juncture, if you try to introduce Gaudi over there, probably the whole subtlety of that affair will be lost. That precisely is being proposed by these scholars, that you should choose a style for your expression. You should choose a style which is suitable for that particular expression. So it is quite possible that a single artist may choose different styles at different junctures. If I am writing about a love poem, I may opt for Vaidarbhi, and if I am writing about a war between Bhima and Duryodhana, I might opt for Gaudi. This is the basic difference between the Indian notion of Riti and the Western notion of style. That I personally think that this notion of Shaili, the style can be translated as Shaili in Sanskrit, not Riti. The notion of Riti perhaps is inspired by the visual arts, by the practices in visual arts. Because as I told you that Dandi and Bhamaha, both of them seem to have undergone some formal training in visual arts. And if you see the texts in visual arts at that time, particularly the Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, in one of the adhyayas of Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, which we are going to discuss when we discuss that text at a later juncture, it speaks about the Chitra Prakaras. Vishnu Dharmottara speaks about the 4 Prakaras of Chitra, which we will discuss later when we discuss that text. But it speaks about Satya, Vainika, Nagara and Mishra types of Chitra. Now Mishra we will keep aside because Mishra is the mixture of all these Prakaras. Satya is the type of picture, Satya is the Prakara of picture which is natural. Now we saw that naturalism is a quality of Vaidarbhi. There is another things that Swabhavikata, all those things can be seen in Satya Chitra. Nagara on the other hand has the subtlety. Nagara has Sanyama. Nagara has the sophistication. Nagara has the contemplation. So some of the qualities which are discussed in Riti can be seen in those Chitra Prakaras also. The Chitra Prakaras go back to 6th century and the theory of Riti came into being in 7th century by the people who have studied visual arts. I have a very strong contention that though it is not a direct import from the field of visual arts, because the styles which they discuss and the classification which they have done is not exactly the same as Vishnu Dharmottara, but the notion is very close to the notion of Chitra Prakara. That is Chitra Prakara and here they call it Riti, that is Chitra, the expression manners. Here they talk of manners, there they talk of categories. So there is a very interesting similarity and certainly calls for further deliberation, further inquiry. The later scholars, as I told you, also talked about many other ritis, Panchali, Magadhi, Lati, Avanti. Even the qualities of those pictures